So I want to talk a little bit about the brain and the workings, but it's going to be a light lecture. Later on, we're going to delve into the mind and complexity and facing the world. So I'm going to be the light lecturer today. And I want to ask a question, which of course is a rhetorical question. Is the brain an important organ? So all of us are saying today now, yes, of course. But it was not always the common knowledge. If you go to the scripture, for example, or looking into the Bible, the word brain as the organ of the brain is not mentioned. Morality, it went to the kidneys. Courage went to the heart. Other sensation went to the stomach. But the brain was left out. So you see, there is no mentioning of the brain in the Bible. If you go to the Egyptian, when they did the mummification process, they entered to the brain through the nose. In a procedure that we do today, they took out this 1.5 kilogram of tissue, wet tissue, they threw it away, and then they mummified the body with all the organ without the brain. And even if we go to the Greek, Aristo, which was a very famous and smart philosopher, he said that the brain is a radiator. The heart is making heat waves, and during the night, mainly during the night, the brain should cool its function is to cool the body, so we are cooling the body while we are sleeping. So nobody knew that the brain is that important. And when people wanted to explain how we feel and what is the diseases in our personality, they used to have like using the fire and the earth and water and air to explain about the personality traits and everything. And then they understood that it's not the elements, it's liquids, the humors. The red liquid, the green liquid, the black liquid, the black bile, and then there was the yellow one. And still today, by the way, we are using these things when we are talking. For example, when people is depressed, at least in Hebrew, but I think that it's in other languages as well, we are saying that he has the black bile. Or if someone is jealous, we say he's green of jealous. Or if someone is temperament, we say he's very red person. So we are still using the notions of the past when we describe things. But if we're going now fast forward, people started to understand that our body is composed out of cells. Now, again, it's a trivial knowledge, but we have to be modest and understand that it's less than 200 years that people understood that our body is composed out of cells. 200 years ago, they built the lens to see the stars, and some people say instead of just looking at the stars, let's look inside. And then when they looked at our tissue, they saw that it's composed out of things that looked in the microscope like this. And it reminded the researchers of where the monks are sleeping in the monastery. And where the monks are sleeping, it calls cells. So this is why it calls cells in our body, not because there is any importance to the word, just it reminded the researchers that it liked where the monks are sleeping. So we knew that our liver is made of cells, and the heart, the skin, and everything, just not the brain. Nobody could see that the brain is also made up of cells. And if you go to medical literature of the late 19th century, they will say that the brain is like a ball of cotton. It's one cell that is wrapped around itself over and over and over and over, and this is how we have this tissue, because nobody could see that our brain is composed out of cells. Everything changed due to a doctor that was rewarded with the Nobel Prize, the first Nobel Prize for medicine, and his name was Ramon y Cajal. Ramon y Cajal was a Spanish doctor. He was a very non-conformist, and he said it's not possible that the brain is different than other organs. So he started sitting and doing some research, and he is the first one that developed a technique for viewing in the microscope, and he showed that the brain is also composed out of cells. We call them neurons. And what he showed, that we have the main part where we have the organelles, the main part, the cell body of the neuron. Here we have a long process which we call the axon. And here we have like an antenna or like three branches where we call the dendrites. And then at the end of the axon, there is another cell. And here the connection between these two cells is called synapse. This is most of the technical terms I'm going to use. So we have the neuron with the cell body, with the axon, and the connection is the synapse. So, and he's considered to be the father of brain research, because now we can research the brain. But then, after a few years after he discovered this, the brain research was it was a very hype thing, but then it became a very depressed science. Because now that we have the knowledge of the cells, people were starting to look at cadavers, looking at the brain, and they showed that when you reach about the age of 25, 26, I'm not sure, but I think that most of us are above this age. When you reach about the age of 25, 26, you have the maximum level of cells in your body. And then from 26, every day we have an increased cellular death. There is no regeneration, no neurogenesis in the brain. So we have less and less and less cells as long as we age. And this is why people said we have to pray, to do some practice, maybe answer some crosswords or puzzles or something like this, so we can get the maximum number of cells when we are about 25. And then to again hope that even if we decline, we stay above the threshold of coherency if we don't want to become dementic when we are old. Now, this notion was still kept alive until the end of the 90s of the last century. The 20th century is the last century. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember that it was the last century. Even when I went to my medical school, this is what we were taught. So now we know that there is another revolution, and I want to get into it. But this was the main idea, and it's true, by the way. I'm going to tell you about how we think about the brain today, but still, there is cellular death, and we reached the peak of the number of cell numbers around 25, 26, and then there is an increased death of cells. Now, the notion of the researcher wasn't that bad in thinking, but they were, again, closed in a problematic thought, because if I have, for example, my heart is composed of cells, of heart muscle cells. Again, my heart does not generate new cells. It's a kind of a programmatic bug in the evolution of the body. We do not have regeneration of heart cells, of muscle heart cells. So let's say that I have a heart attack now, and I managed to recover and everything. I have now less cells in my heart than I had before my heart attack. I can go on living until the end of the day. Everything is going to be okay. But my heart functions now less than it functions just before I had the heart attack. And again, we can think about the liver, kidneys, everything at the same thought. And this is why people said the same is for the brain. We have the maximum cells around 25, 26, and this is where the notion of individuality and also the world belong to the young. And this is how people explain why Einstein developed all his theories until he was 25, 26. And then we go down, and surely our brain is going to function a bit less than it functioned before. So this is the general thought of how the brain is working. But now I want to add some more description. Again, how does the brain work? We know that the brain works by the release of electricity that goes from, it generates at the cell body, and then it goes all the way through the axon. There, at the end of the axon in the synapse, the cells are secreting neurotransmitters, all kind of chemical stuff. The neurotransmitter can activate the other neuron or deactivate the other neuron, and this is the communication of the cells. By the way, this, again, trivial knowledge was just discovered in 1924. A German doctor, Professor Berger, again, was rewarded with the Nobel Prize for describing. He developed the EEG, the device that shows the working of the brains and the electricity that is working through the neurons. And then people started to say, but the knowledge that we know, again, if we're talking about framing of work, doesn't correlate with our views of the world. We see a lot of people around 70, 80 years old, and they are very clear. their capacity has not diminished since they were young. So it does not correlate to the notion of the cellular death and the continual decline. This involved with another discovery that was discovered at around the 80s of last century. The one that discovered it was an Italian doctor. Her name was Rita Levi-Monticelli. And she discovered that again, she was rewarded with the Nobel Prize, and she was the longest living Nobel Prize. She lived until the age of 106. When she was 103, and it was about 10 years ago, she came to Israel for a lecture that she gave, and she was sharp and she was very, very intense until her last day. She discovered that there are some substances that we call NGF. NGF, it's neuronal growth factors. So there are some substances that causes the cells to remain alive, and also they are causing the axon to have another branches, and we can now connect to other cells. After she discovered the NGF, she discovered some other stuff. We know today about other stuff like BDNF and other growth factors, which are related to the making of the synapses. By the way, she was saying, I think that she was a bit sarcastic, but she was saying that every day when she gets up, she puts some NGF in her as an eye drop, and this is why she stays sharp all the time. I'm not sure if it was correct or not, but she was kind of a person, when she was around 18, she came from a very non-religious Jewish family in Italy, and then when she became 18, her father told her, it's okay that you are very smart, but you have a function. After all, you are a female. You need to get married and to have kids. And she said to him, you know what? I'm going to get married, but I'm going to marry science. And then until her last day, she did not create a family. She was very activist political-wise and scientific-wise. And she discovered this NGF. Now, if we combine this knowledge, today we are saying that the ability of our neurons to create new synapses does not deteriorate over the years. At the age of 60, 70, 80, 90, again, it's not age-related, we can still release the substances like the NGF and create new synapses, create new connections. And this is part of the revolution of the brain revolution, again, around the 80s, 90s of last century, which we call the neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity says that our cells, the neurons, are all the time modulated and remodulated, and they can create new ways of communication, new synapses, or they can decrease the synapses. So we can, everything that when we think about the brain, we don't need to count the number of cells. We need to look about the connections of the cells. In a sense, I'm just going to say a number which is of course not true. I rather have 100 neurons, each one of them connected to the other 99, than 10,000 neurons, each one is a lone island in my brain. So the connection is what makes our ability to think, to describe, to emote, to have all sensory input and everything. So this is the neuroplasticity. And here, I want to say a few things, and then another thing, then we can connect them. One of the things that is interesting about this revolution, that every time when we discover something in the science, people want to put on that knowledge the responsibility of why things happen. Back then, it was the goddesses and the gods. Then it was the one God. Afterwards, it was our genetics. It's not me; it's my genes. Today we know again that this is not true because we can affect our genes through the epigenetic revolution. And then people discovered the brain and it's working. They say, it's not me, it's my brain. And my brain does not change. My brain is very fixed. We don't have new growth of cells. So my brain is responsible for what I think, what I do, and everything. And I always say we don't have to exchange God with the brain. We need to think about it in a more sophisticated and deep way. So today we know, because of the neuroplasticity, that not only that the brain changes, but maybe this is the most changing organ that we have. It always reflects our experiences. every time that we experience new things, every time that we learn new things, all of these things are being reflected in our brain. If we can go back from Paris in a week from now, and then in 2 weeks I will remember some of the lectures that were here, that means that my brain is different than the brain that entered this convention. So what we are saying now and what we are experiencing changes us and changes the way that our brain physically looks, and not, of course, not only physically. So this is one thing that I want to say about it. Now, when I was talking with Marta before, she told me maybe we can talk about thinking, maybe we can talk about education and learning, and I want to de-romanticize the word thinking and learning, just to take it into the research. When we think about thinking in terms of the working of the brain, we're saying that every time that a neuron through the synapses is processing any information, it does thinking. This is thinking, the processing of information. So now, when we sit here, we think a lot. We have a lot of thinking, a lot of processing information. We have thinking which involves our senses, because we process our visual information. We process auditory information. We process sometimes the scent of our environment. We process how we see it, and you can feel now your cellular. Now that I said you feel your cellular, so again you have another level of thinking now. So when we talk about thinking, we are saying thinking is the processing of information. And if we go even larger than this, we can say that every system. Now I can also talk about one cellular life, like amoeba and everything, but let's go just for every system that has neurons, every creature, every animal does thinking. So all the animals are thinking, but now we can discuss the level, the depth of thinking, the complexity of thinking, the abstract of thinking. How much abstract is it? How much invention do we have? How complex is the thinking? But we can discuss about the complexity, not the fact that an animal or a creature is thinking. Again, we can even go to the amoeba or even germs and say that they are thinking, because they are processing information via routes that we don't know, that we don't understand because we don't have a nervous system. But we are saying that everything thinks. In this sense, it also connects to the open-ended intelligence of the work of Weaver, which said about what is thinking, and then everything that comes in relation with the world, with itself, or with the other, is doing some process of thinking. So this is a very interesting thing to think about. What does it mean to think, and how now we can differentiate between levels of thinking, and we can work about it. I'm sure that in this week we are going to learn about it. And now, what does it mean to learn? To learn means, again, if I'm going to be very simple and not very romantic, every time we have a change at the synaptic levels, a constant change, a change that is going, it's not just processing of information, but there is a change in the synaptic level, and this change continues over time. That means that we had learning. That means that we learned, that the creature, the animal, the human, we learned something. Now, when I say that there is change at the synaptic level, there can be 3 kinds of change, maybe even more, but 3 kinds. A, we mean that there can be new synapses, as I said. Now this axon branches and they connect to another neuron, and now I have a new synapse that was not there before. So this, again, if we learn something new, every time we are learning things that are new, we have new synaptic connections. And I talk about the synaptic connection, but we have to understand that another layer of the brain revolution is speaking about neural networks. So it's not just one connection. It's a network that connects a very big parts of our brain, and they're working together. So I'm going again to simplify it and say just a new connection, but it's not just at the micro level. So we can have a new connection. Other thing, we can make one synaptic connection even stronger. And this is also part of learning. We can strengthen the synaptic levels. If I learned something and now I practice it, and it becomes more and more embedded in me, so now every time this neuron fires, very quickly and very strongly it will enlight or activate or deactivate the other neuron, because now the synapses are stronger because we learned something new. And the third thing about learning, and this is important as well, sometimes to learn we need to trim synapses. We need to break through of synapses. Today, when we talk about when you read about memory, people used to say, let's talk about memory, let's talk about working memory. But today, the brain researchers are talking about memory functions. And part of the memory function is also forgetting. Forgetting is not just, oh, I have a bad memory, or forgetting, oh, I have a dementia, it's a huge problem. Forgetting is part of the normal way of our brain. Because whenever we learn something new, sometimes we need to forget. And to forget means to trim. We need to deactivate synapses that were working before. Okay?
Are these irreversible processes? Are these processes irreversible?
So when we talk about the brain, most of the things are not irreversible, because the synapses we can trim them and then they can be reworked together. But if you have cellular death, this is irreversible. So cellular death is irreversible, but if the cell did not die, just was disconnected, you can reconnect it, and you can see it very easily. Let's say, it's not true, but let's say that I was born, or when I was 3 years old, I've been in France because my family or my mother or my father went to the embassy, and I've been there. And from the age of 3 to 5, I've learned French, and I could speak French. It's not true. But now I came back to Israel, and for many years, I did not speak French. If you put me here now in Paris at the first day, I would tell you, what do you speak about? I don't remember a thing from French. What does it mean? It means when I learned French, I had new connection. But now, because I did not practice it, the connections were trimmed. But if I go back to your question, the cells did not die. But now, being put back here in Paris in few days, in few weeks, because the process takes time, the connections are going to be remade. In the neuroscientific language, there is an idiom which we say, use it or lose it. If you use something, if you use a practice, you keep the connection, but if you don't use it, you lose the connections. But some of the losing of the connections are temporary. It depends if you're going to use it as well. By the way, this is why sleep is very important for the brain, because during sleep, we create the new connection, and during sleep, we also disconnect the connection. So sleep is good also for remembering and also for forgetting, but everything is tied up to the memory process.
Does it always happen only in sleep? Can it happen when you are not sleeping?
I wanted to question as far as I also know is the building and also the what you said, cutting
trimming, yes,
trimming of connection. That this has been shown. There is some visualization of that. So through the scientific approaches, but I'm questioning how much evidence do we have today that exactly this, which has been shown by a specific visualization methodology, is indeed learning, is indeed memorizing, and is indeed forgetting. That is my question. Or is this still a hypothesis? So, it could be that this is what we see here is the process of memorizing and forgetting. You are more into this, so you can say if it is.
Some of it is of course still speculative, but today there are also a lot of research that is backing this up.
Okay.
Because of there is what we call optogenetics, the ability through genetic manipulation of neurons, putting some proteins that are sensitive to light. So now you have the ability to lighten one neuron or a neural network, or to deactivate it. And you can see, for example, in rats, but again, it's not by accident that there is a play about rats and humans, because we are not that different. So when you activate a neural network, you can create memories, or you can strengthen memories of a maze that the rat just learned.
Ah.
And when you deactivate them,
Okay.
you can show that the rat is forgetting. And when you do some blood tests, you can see that sometimes there are some proteins that are released at the trimming stage. This is how they discovered that it happened mostly at night. And you can see that the level of proteins are going up, proteins that are connected to the trimming stage. So today there is a lot of backup to this saying that that when we learn, let's say that learning processes is related to the synapses. By the way, Ramon Cajal in 1905 said, I think, after he discovered the neurons, I think he said that the neurons and the way they are connected is correlated to learning. But nobody thought that he is saying something which is of value. Today we know that he had a very interesting insight of the working of our brain. So this is one thing that I think is very important. Again, our brain is an organ of change. As when I saw the YouTube from March, I remember Stefan said that we are creature of radical transformative agents, and I thought that it's very much correlated to the brain, because if our brain is exposed to the changes, so we can see that many of the synapses can be recreated, destroyed, maybe rebuilt. And in this sense, we are, as humans, radical transformative agents, because our brains is also always reflects the amount of things and the amount of changes that happens to us through the life process or through the event that we are doing. And you can think about maybe a threshold, that after a certain kind of threshold, there is a radical change at the all personality or the all working of the brain of a human. So this is one thing that I think we can take into account when we talk about to the coming week. Another thing that I want to address is when we look at the brain. Again, if we look at the brain in a very large, very crude site, we can divide the brain into two parts. Sometimes even more, but now I want to put the light on two parts. Let's say that you open up my skull, I do it upon me. The thing that you're going to see when you take out my skull is the cortex. The cortex is the newest, evolutionary speaking, is the newest part of the brain. And we have, as human, a very big cortex. By the way, not the biggest. Why? What is unique about the human brain? We don't have an answer. Every time people say it's the biggest, no. Biggest in relation to the proportion of the body, no. The cortex is bigger than other animals? No. Bigger in relation to the other parts of the brain? No. Maybe, the prefrontal cortex, where we say that a lot of the personality of the human sits, maybe relatively is a bit bigger in the humans in relation to other parts of the brain and in relation to other animals.
I've always read that there's an explosion of the neocortex. It's this frontal lobe basically. Like
it's the prefrontal, it's the prefrontal lobe. Yes.
Right.
This is where, if you search in Google, this is where we say the executive function of the brain are sitting. So
because if you look at like the chimpanzee's head, you'll see like where we have like this neocortex, they have like a slope.
Yeah, they still have the folds and everything, but even if you take the prefrontal cortex in relation to other part of the brain, in relation to the body mass, maybe we human has the biggest one. But I'm not sure even if it's a relevant question, but people are asking. So what is unique about us? So maybe we need to go and find other thing that is unique about us, rather than the size of the brain.
I read stuff about cetaceans, dolphins, and whales that had some more to the brain.
If you look at our people, used to say that the size of our brain is the biggest. It was like 100 years ago, but then they discovered that whales has a brain that is 6 times more bigger than humans. But if you go to and you see, they also have cortex, but the prefrontal cortex is relatively not as developed as humans. But again, I think that it's just a nuance
No, I heard they had something more than humans in the brain, and they had like more stuff about sonars, and I mean, there was new.
They have you know, when we talk about our senses, and I will mention it in a few minutes, but they have other senses that we don't, like the sonar system. But it doesn't mean that their brain, in a sense, is more advanced than ours. It just means that they have another sense that we don't have. For example, birds have the sensitivity to the magnetic, to magnet. This is why, because they have iron in their skull, and when they fly across the ocean, they are flying according to the magnetic resonance. So, again, this is a capability that we don't have, but other creatures may have it.
You said connection is more relevant than number. And you said thinking is processing of information, and learning a constant change of the synaptic level.
Yeah.
What is about that? Is there any research about the connections themselves, the quantity or the quality of connections? Compared from the human brain, you said
comparing to other animals, there is not really a research, but again, it's we have to think, what will be the question? How can I compare the memorization of a maze of a rat to a memorization of me being able to know my ways at the CRI and finding the coffee machine? How can we differentiate? How can we distinguish or differentiate? We don't know. But I think that mostly what we discover is that many things are the same. The same in the sense of the physiology. We have to talk about the levels of complexity, the level of obstruction, maybe the emergence of language and how language how language changed everything and maybe enabled us to self-reflect also and to know that we know. Maybe other animals don't have it because they don't have this kind of depth of language. But this is what we can talk. But the difference physiologically, we see no huge difference.
Okay.
They're doing now this connectome project in which there are but we are not even to the full rat. So I think before we can see really the differences.
3 years ago, they said that they were able to do the connectome of 1 millimeter cube of a brain of a rat because it creates a lot. It demands a lot of data. This is the blue brain project of the EU. It demands a lot of data, and we still don't have computers that are still strong enough.
Maybe I can add a few information.
Yeah.
There were some tests about the connectivity in human brains. People that are more intelligent, they have less connections, but they have a better quality of connections. So it definitely is relevant which type of connections you have. And about the human brain project, there is a worm, I think it's called C. elegans or something like this. It has 300 neurons and it is fully mapped, and if you simulate it, then it exactly behaves as the real one, for example. Yeah,
this is the open worm project. It has the connectome of 302 neurons because this is what it's a C. elegans, it's a worm. This is what the number of neurons they have, but they were able to map the connection of the neurons to the muscles. But they don't have connections of the neurons to their gut or anything. But now you have the worm walking around in the computer, and again we have a few ethical questions. Again, is it alive? Is it a life form? Can we do a restart to the computer now? Because if we restart the computer, we kill this worm that now lives in the computers. But it's
I think on the worm we don't have this problem on an ethical aspect, but there's another cool thing they also created. They took the worm and then put it on a Lego robot, and it works. It acts like it's a real worm, so it's just another body.
I say only motion-wise, not digestive-wise. So we have another levels of complexity before we can get a full-fledged animal into the computer. So motor-wise, yes, but otherwise, no.
I think it's also the behavior and so on, and the newer versions. In the first version, which is 3 years old, it was only the motor abilities, but in the newest one, I think half a year ago or 1 year ago, it was even more.
Okay, maybe. But surely it's going to be developed because it's a very simple animal.
For sure.
What is the difference between behavior and motion? Like, what do? They respond to different stimulus?
Yeah, and the way how they react. If it's more, let's say, intelligent, for example. So if you have just a action-reaction, for example, you see something, then you walk through there, or if you have a more elaborated plan. I mean, a worm has no real elaboration, but it's more complex.
Must have some, if not, you wouldn't be alive.
I love it.
Yeah, but you can be alive even though if you have very simple rules. For example, if you say just go where light is or where I smell some food and avoid some danger, then you have 2 rules, and even this is enough. Or you need a third rule which says if there's nothing, then just continue walking, for example. So with these 3 rules, you already can live.
Actually, I had a question, but now I have a comment too.
Yeah.
Am I allowed?
Yeah, of course.
No, because this sorry.
No
this
rules.
This
Yeah.
example of the worm is so fascinating for me because as I needed to prepare also for this week, I was looking into this question of how we humans in science create our knowledge, and so there is an assumption now that says, not by you, but by many scientists, we share that. A worm has no, there is no big deal about being a worm. Then we program a software by this assumption, right? Then we perceive a robot is doing actually what our assumption enabled it, and then we say, oh, that's a worm, right? Without maybe. I mean, it's not. Maybe we can agree that a worm is really no big deal, but we don't know because we haven't been a worm, all right? It is a perception of a human or of many humans who agree on, we see a worm, this is the range of behavior of a worm, this is the range of stimulus a worm can actually process, right? And then we program it, and then we say, oh, we see a worm now. I love that. Sorry, that is my comment.
But I think it's just to say that the fact that I haven't been a worm does not mean that I cannot comment.
I like that.
Again.
I completely like that. For instance, but may
I was going to say, like off your comment, that one of the interesting things about Darwin is that he took worms exceptionally seriously. He wrote he studied worms in his garden for like decades, and wrote like an entire manuscript on the way in which worms interact with the complex ways in which they interact with the environment. So like, I just felt like that was an interesting way in which Darwin took things that people maybe overlook as simple or as silly with a heightened level of interest. And maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, the difference between a human and C. elegans, which is a worm, is only 26,000 genes. That's all. In 26,000 genes, you can go from the worm to the human. Again, I'm sorry that I de-romanticize what is to be a human. Yes.
My question was, I have an idea how we as humans measure now quantities of neuronal connections, but how do we measure qualities? I have no idea. Can you help me?
Well, the quality is about when we say about how strong is a connection. If I activate one cell, how strongly and how effectively will it activate the other cell which it is connected to? Activate means to activate it or to deactivate. It depends, because some of the neurons are they are inhibiting other neurons. This is their function. So.
And strength is like time, or is strength
it is time,
power?
the threshold of sensitivity, how much electricity should come in order for the synapse to fire and then to enlighten the other neurons. So there are some biologically way of comparing it. Again, everything is also a speculation, but this is how you say the quality of
this is how we try to get understanding.
It's the number of neurotransmitters you release.
It's the number, but also their effect. It's the quantity. When I said that we can strengthen a synapse, it means that we have a working synapse, and now it's stronger. It means that for each pulse of electricity here, most probably more neurotransmitters are going to be released to the synaptic gap, or it means that there are more receptors now on the other side, so for each neurotransmitter, there's going to be a bigger operation on the other of the other neuron. So another thing that I want to describe, and again, I think it's good that it turned out that this lecture is the first one, because I think it can give a lot of things on how to think and how to use, and also it will relate to the Metzinger paper that we all read and we all are going to talk about today in the evening.
Metzinger.
Yeah, this is the paper for today.
I know.
And another thing that, as I said, when we sit here now, I stand now, and I'm speaking, so I use my voice, I can hear myself, I'm moving my hands and my body, and I move a lot. I think about the lecture. I'm also doing some translation in my mind now, and I remember things about my flat and things that I want to write. So I have many things, I and every one of us, many working of our brains that happened simultaneously. In order for the ease of talk, we say that there are 4 channels of activation when we talk about the brain. The first channel is the motor channel. All the parts of the brain that are responsible for our motor activation, the movement of our muscles, of our bones, of our tendons and everything. And there is a big part of our brain that is concentrated on the motion, which is also our balance, for example, coordination, all the things that are revolve around motion. So this is the first channel. The second channel is all our sensory input and sensory processing. The sight, the smell, the scent. By the way, when we go and look about the brain, we say that we have more than 5 senses. The 6th sense is not the mystical one. It's not the red dot here. The 6th sense is the proprioception. Is our ability to sense our body, to know the motion of our bodies, our ability to have a balance. This is the 6th sense we call the proprioception. The 7th sense is pain. Today we know that pain by itself is a sense. It's not just an unpleasant touch or an unpleasant sight or something like this. Pain by itself is also a sense of our body. So our brain all the time is working on processing information about the sensor, and this is the second channel. The third channel is what we call doing some supervision on the working of our bodies. All the organs of our body, our heart, our kidneys, our lungs, our digestive system, even our immune system are constantly in relation to the brain, and the brain can increase the digestive process or decrease it, can increase our heart rate or decrease it, can increase the level of the filtration rate of the kidneys or decrease it. So our brain supervises all over our organs and the working of the organ, and this is the third channel. And the fourth channel is what we call the cognitive channel. All the things that are about our thoughts, emotions, planning, interactions, thinking, learning, and everything. This is the cognitive channel. So these are the 4 working of the channel. And just by saying this, we can see that the saying that there is the mind-body problem in a sense is solved in a sense, because with our brain we do everything. We are in relation to the body and in relation to our cognitive abilities, and everything is being done at the same organ. But I'm not going to go into this. Now, when we want to say, as I told you, I want to talk about 2 main parts of the brain. So the first part, when you see when I take up my skull, you see the cortex. The development is the newest development, and then if you go just 2 centimeters below, all the other parts is what we call the subcortex. So we have the cortex and the subcortex. The subcortex of us humans is very much the same as the subcortex of all the animals. We share the same. We share many similar things to fish, to snakes, to birds, and of course to other mammals and to the apes. So we have the subcortex, which is a very huge part of the brain, and our cortex. And people were asking, why do we need cortex? Why does the cortex evolve? Why does it evolve? Why did it evolve anyway? So one of the things that scientists are saying, that when we talk about our consciousness, about our awareness, for example, I do now a motion in my hand, and I'm conscious to that motion. So that means that the working of the neuron that took out this action came from our cortex. Our cortex was meant for our consciousness and or for our awareness. But when I took yesterday the metro, and there was no room. It was very crowded at the noon. I had to squeeze myself, but then the metro drove, and I had to keep my balance. This motion, which again is a muscular motion, did not come from my conscious part, because I could not compute what I need to do with my body. So that the actions or the commands from my muscles to move when I keep my balance came from my subcortex. So that means that all the 4 channels that I was talking about, the cognitive, even the cognitive, the muscular, the movement, the motion, the motor one, the sensing and the supervision of our body, all of these 4 channels, we have it on the cortex level and also on the subcortex level. Even the cognitive, because we think that cognition is all about consciousness, but today there is a lot of research that talks about intuition. Intuition is the unconscious or subcortical memory processing. Because we have memory that is also, in a sense, it's not available to us into a conscious level, but it is available to us as a thing that as reflexes, as autonomous response that I have, as a kind of a behavior that I feel like I feel that I have to do it. This sensation, which is very strange to describe, comes from memory processing, which happens on our subcortex level, on the levels that we don't have any access to, that it's not conscious. And again, we will talk about it more in the evening when we talk about the Metzinger paper, which mentions it as well. So so again, the researchers were asking, why do we need consciousness? Why do we need awareness at all? It's an open question. I don't have an answer to it, but some of the things, one of the answers that people are saying, which I like, is the thing to think that we need the consciousness evolved in order to solve problems. That means when I go from my house to this place, and this place, and I do it every time, every day, and nothing changes, I don't need to think about it. This is why when we drive, we don't need to think about it. If we drive to a known place, we just do it subconsciously. That means that my subcortex is now working, and it tells my muscle, you have to go here, and then you have to go to your left, and then you have to go to your right, because I know these kind of things. But let's say that I go, and suddenly I see that there is a hole. Now I have to answer this question, and this is when everything comes to our conscious level, and now we have to process the information in order to solve what do I do with this hole. So one of the reasons that people are saying that we have the conscious level or the cortex is in order to help us solve new problems that happens during our day-to-day life. Now you said before about intelligence and fewer connections. In a sense, it is related to it, because if I will give you now a new task to learn, and this new task requires that you see something and then you have to react with your hand here or with your leg here, we have to learn about how to do it. If I will connect each one of us to the EEG, we will see, the EEG, that's the working of our brain, we will see that many parts of our brain are now working during the learning process. The part of my motor skills, my sight processing skills, the coordination parts of my body, the understanding of what I need to do. So we have many parts of our brain are working when we learn. But as we become professional about doing stuff, there are 2 things that happens in our brain which are very, very interesting. One, less and less space or less and less parts of the brain needs to work in order to do the same action. So part of the learning is knowing how to make it more efficiently. And the second thing which is interesting, and this is why I think it's connected to less connections in a sense, we need less connections because we are professional in order to do the same task. But the other thing which is interesting, the brain takes this knowledge and takes it down to the subcortex level. So when we are professional about things, in a sense, what our brain is doing is saying, as if it says to itself, I don't need to think about it, I don't need to be aware about it, to be conscious about it. I can take it down now to the subconscious level, and through the subconscious level I can do and be as professional, maybe even more professional than I did as I learned it. So our brain is always trying to be more efficient, in a sense, less working to do in order to do the same task, and also to take it down to the subconscious level and make it, in a sense, like an instinct, or I don't have to think about it in order to perform it. So again, when we learn things, and this is maybe this is also important, and maybe also a question, because when we learn things, in a sense, we need also to let go of our conscious knowledge that we know these things, because this is also how our brain is working, and it's an open question if you can describe it even, as you said at the beginning, if we can teach it, because how can you teach someone not to know that he knows something, or to have a trust that he knows it, or something like this. So I leave it as a flying question to the coming going to think about it. And lastly, one last thing that I want to say before I finish is that I said at the beginning that there is no neurogenesis in the body. Cells are already keep dying, and from the age of 25, 26. Today we know that this by itself is not true. There are two places in the brain that we see that there are neurogenesis. There is development of new cells, no matter how old we are. One part, which is an open question, but I'm not going to go into it. One part is the part that is involved processing of the scent. And in the processing of scent, we see that there is neurogenesis in the body, in the brain. But I will leave it to other pondering your question. But the other part of the brain, which we see the neurogenesis, and it's a very interesting part, is a part when we call it the hippocampus. The hippocampus it's located deep here on the temporal level. It's the part that is connected to orientation, physical orientation, and also creation of memories. This is where our short-term memory is being consolidated, and then we transfer it to other parts of our brain. So in the hippocampus, we have a genesis of new cells, and this is why, no matter how old we are, we can create new memories. Because if we had a maximum capacity, until a certain point we would reach the threshold, but we can create new memories because we also have neurogenesis in the hippocampus. And as you said at the beginning, Marta, I said, what is the environment of us working? And I was thinking when I said to you that part of the environment is our memory, because who am I, in a sense? I am the sum of my memories, the sum of the knowledge that I acquired, the sum of the thing that I think that I remember. By the way, we also know that memories are the least thing that you can use, that you can say that are trustworthy. But again, I will not talk about this now. But I am the sum of my memory. I am the sum of my memories. But in a sense, my memories are keep changing, and not only changing, are keep forming. So who is this me? Because this me that was just a year, and this me that is going to be a week from now, is not the same, because my memories are not the same. I have new ones, and these new ones are changing the old one, and my hippocampus is also always generating new cells. So the question of the self, when you ask it even through the brain perspective, is a very complex question, because this self is radical transformative, as you mentioned sometime in the video. And one more thing that is very interesting to think about, that today, through technology, we have the ability to implant memories. This was a trial that was done on animals, and you can implant memories from one animal to another animal, and in this sense creating false, but they are not false now because we implanted them, memories on one cell. So now we have to think, if my memories are all the time changing, and if now through technology You can implant new memories into my hippocampus, and then to my brain, and then to my identity. Again, the question is, where is the self, and what is the sense of the continuity of the self? Where does it come from? Because I can say now that via technology, I can change my hippocampus. I can change my memories. I can implant new memories. So what does it will mean? What does it mean, or what does it will mean? Because it's still in working, but we already have success in rats, and then I said with rats and animals, the distance is not that huge. That means that also via technology, the definition of what is this constant self that we talk about, will it stay, and what does it mean? Because now we can tinker into it and change it. Because if we change the landscape of memories, we change the landscape of who am I as a human. Yes?
Oh, please.
Yeah.
How, and I think the two are a bit connected, because if you implant memories, it does not prejudge that you're going to be able to retrieve, connect, add concepts, I mean the thinking part. So
but here with the rats, they showed that this memory was activated. For example, they implanted a false memory of fear from shock, from electrical shock in rats, from that happens in a red room, and now they changed the memory and put it into another.
So it's like a motor memory. It's not like a knowledge.
It's a motor and also an emotion in a sense, because this is, the amygdala is also being activated.
Because I didn't finish my question was, how does this piece together the senses and the thinking and the knowledge and the memory to produce the sequences that we can utter something that is constructed, or construct more and more complex concepts, or thoughts.
When you are doing a thinking, a human now is doing a thinking. Where do I go? I go to my mind. And what do I do in my mind? I go to my memories and to my knowledge, and I say, how does this relate to the fact that I know A, B, and C? And I remember that I've been in that place hearing about this A, B, and C. So all our knowledge is embedded within our memories. And now, all that I wanted to say is, if we can change our memories, by the way, they keep changing all the time, but this is again not for today, but if we can change our memories, that means we can change the knowledge, also our self-knowledge, and in that sense, the question of identity becomes much more fluid than we previously assumed.
But like, you implant me the paper of Metzinger, so I don't need to read it?
Yeah. And maybe in 20, 30 years, so I will be able to download French, and I don't have to be there as a child and then I can download French.
Okay, go ahead.
Or Polish, so I can. I have the passport. I have to know the language.
You just don't know what will come with it.
Yeah.
You implant French, suddenly you need a croissant in the morning.
What can I say? Nobility obliges.
Yeah, there's the experience that you don't have. Yeah.
It's an open question. Maybe we will be able to also have an experience implanted, emotion implanted. I don't know. Everything now is, we are on the verge, via the technology, we are on the verge of many other revolutions to come.
You know, on a different.
And I think we have to think about mental disorder here.
I'm sorry?
We have to think about mental disorders here. Yeah, implanting new memories. It's just not a simple thing. I don't think so. If I wander around with some memories of yours, I have to connect them in my psyche, in my cognition. Yeah. So
I'm sure that it's going to open up new avenues for new questions and new discoveries.
And a lot of work for psychologists and psychiatrists.
But I don't think you did it automatically. There's so much evidence where you make people trick into thinking something, and then which didn't even happen, and then they make up their own rational story around it.
Yes, this is what
so
we call the false memory.
This happens automatically. It's false memory. So you don't have to actively implant it. If your brain thinks it has that memory, it'll make up some story about how you got there. If right now you gotta say someone puts you somewhere all of a sudden, then after 5 years your memory will have some sort of weird story about how you took a bus or a metro or whatever. Well, it never happened.
Yeah, you know, it's part of what we call the false memory, and false memory is not only on one person, it's also on the national level, you know. There was a study, and then I remember that you wanted to remark something and you wanted to ask something. There was a study done in 2006 or 2007 in Holland. And back in 1996 or 1998, there was a plane crash of El Al airplane in Amsterdam. And then in 2006, and not I say 2006, 2007, not by accident, by incident, researchers sent out letters to the Dutch population asking them, can you tell us where were you when the airplane crashed on the Amsterdam suburbs? How did you see it? How did you feel about it? And then people responded. Around 10,000 people responded to the question. And about 70–75% told that they remembered being at their home, seeing on the news the airplane crashing on the suburbs, and the sense that they felt, and so on and so forth. Now, why do I say it? Because when you go...
meaning, and in a way, it is able to change everything we saw until that moment.
Yeah.
So the brain, physiologically speaking, is not very different, the human brain, from other species' brains.
Yeah, mainly I speak about now mammals, you know, but again, if you go even to snakes and birds,
it does not explain.
You see a similarity in the physiology.
Yeah.
And again, what we need to ask is not about the physiology, is about the depths or the complexity or the interaction, and we cannot differentiate it from the emergence of language, which changes everything.
But would you say that it's functionally different? So it's not physically, but functionally.
Functionally, it's partly different and partly the same.
The same, yeah. And would you say that because we have, as humans, we have developed culture and behavioral patterns that would have trained our brains to work as they do?
Yeah, of course. Of course, we know today that with culture changes the brain, and the environment that you are changes who you are, definitely. And also indoctrinates, as you said at the beginning, indoctrinates who you are. And I will tell you one thing from the paper of Metzinger. He says, even if there is a child and his parent is telling him, you are responsible for what you did, and you will get a prize or a punishment, this child, even if he doesn't think that he has a personality, will take it into account, and now it will change his brain and how he thinks, and eventually he will become a full-grown human with a personality, with a self.
So in learning then, why do people learn at different speeds if it's just science? If you put two children, raise them the exact same, and put them on a piano, they're still going to learn at different paces.
Yeah, so we do, again, there are also some genetically traits that we still don't understand why people are better at one thing than another, but I have to say something that I was talking with Marta before even the convention. When we talk about learning, most of the time we think about cognitive learning. But we have to remember from what I said, that learning is not about cognition or cognitive learning. We can learn new movement, motion. We can learn how to see. We can learn how to smell. We can learn how to taste. So we can learn also in the level of the senses. So learning goes through all the 4 channels that I was speaking. We can learn how to control our blood pressure, how to control our breath rate. So when we say about learning, we are saying that learning is not just cognitive learning. It goes all the way through all the 4 channels. And what makes someone better here or that, we still don't know. But again, I would say that with technology, now there were a lot of research done that via technology, via sending some magnetic pulses outside of our skull or electrical, I can enhance the learning process of humans and even the memory of it. So with this optimistic, technological, futuristic saying, I can say that I can give you the floor, Marta.
Regarding what you said about the false memory, I wonder how this false memory can become true, both for individuals and for collectivity. Because if at the beginning it's false, then maybe we need to change our axiologic perspective and say that even if it was false at the beginning, it becomes true really. So
that's a good saying, because when I say false memory, I say it from, let's say, from a researcher point of view, and I know that this memory is not true. But if I put you under the fMRI, this device that shows not only the brain but how it works, if you tell a lie or tell something which is true, I can tell from the fMRI if you are lying or you are saying the truth. But if you are saying something which is a false memory, there is no way to differentiate, because for our brain, a false memory is a memory.
Yeah.
And more than this, because if I will tell you now a memory of my childhood, I will not tell you the memory of my childhood as it was.
No.
I will tell you as it is now. And in a year from now, if I will tell you the same memory, I will not tell how it was, how it was when I told it now.
Yeah.
So in a sense, a lot of the researchers are saying that all memory is also false memory.
Yeah.
Can you consciously fabricate a memory and believe it to the degree that it will be?
I think that I have two answers to it. A,
Yes,
from
no.
experience, yes. B, from science, no, I don't know how to, I cannot explain it, but from experience, from life experiences, of course. I think that if you know how to do it, you can say, you can tell a story, and if this story is impacting and it has a lot of life, it can transform you in a way that you don't know whether it was true or not. Or the question of its being true or not is not relevant. It becomes who you are. But this is again not the scientific saying. This is my life.
No,
my
experience
life
is also
yes.
scientific procedure. Something not conceptual. How, like what you are saying about how, like what's known about the brain now, how does it, like knowledge about it, how can it impact a person's thinking about their own thinking?
I think that again this is an open question that we can say, because if you go, there is what is being called the science practice gap. It's in science, in medicine, and also in education. There is what happens in the science and what happens in the practice, as you said, and there is a huge gap between the two things. How this knowledge changes one person's view, I think first of all it's an open question. For me, if I tell you personally, I think it's very important, and partly it also releases the need to hold the trueness of things, the trueness of myself, the trueness of this or that value, and in a sense it invites a more playful attitude. But on the other hand, I think that it has the seed of a higher level of responsibility, because it's not my brain, it's not just my genes, it's me. It's how I interact, it's the environment that I choose to be in, it's the level of interaction and what do I do, and all this influences me as well. So the responsibility goes back to me as a human while I know it, because I cannot just throw it to other things.
Why do you speak about false memory and not relative memory? Because it can be another way of considering how memory is changing for everybody, and depending on the place, the culture, the experiments. So.
When you go to the study of memory, you see that there are a lot of description of how to describe memories. But the false memory is something that it's a coin that is being used now, and as you probably think, it creates a lot of questions, open questions, in what to do in the law.
Yeah.
Because how can you, now we have a witness, is it a true memory? Is it a false memory? Because lying, let's say a lie and the truth, we can differentiate as if. But false or not, it's no answer here.
Yeah, it can be an impression or something yeah.
No, but it's not even an impression of culture. It's thinking you were at some place at some date while you were actually something else. So it's actually it's actually false. It's not because you perceive it differently, but because you said, oh, I was in that country in that week, but well, you were actually 3 weeks later, basically.
That's very false.
I just wanted to say there's an article I read recently that I thought was interesting, which said that it's a misconception that science has ever had anything to do with truth. Like truth in the sense that philosophers or religious people think about truth. Like science more tries to come up with explanations for things that change, and theories that fit a certain realm of phenomena that we can perceive and study in some meaningful sense. But truth is something different, and I think that the clash between our current age, which I think is under a type of scientism ideology, and the notion of truth, as I think philosophers and religious people think about truth, comes up in like discussions that we're in a post-truth era. Like, and I don't think we are in a post-truth era. Like
fake news.
I don't think so. I don't think we're in a fake news or a post-truth era. I think that's bullshit. I think that it's just that the other that people can trust is changing, and like, for example, like with false memory, like even the framing of that is, I think, the wrong way to frame it. Like take for example, like this phrase, all this information has its relevance to, say, politics. Like take the slogan "Make America Great Again." Like "Make America Great Again" is a false memory in some sense. Like if you ask Trump supporters when America was great, there's like, they'll say like, some will say the 60s, some will say the 30s, some will say 19th century, and then if you tell them like the things that were objectively going on at that time, like, it's not necessarily better than today in many different dimensions, depending on who you are.
But that's no memory, that's knowledge.
Sorry?
That's no memory, that's knowledge.
Well,
I mean, memory is if you experience it by yourself.
But like memory also as a social mass construction, like there's a memory of what America is, and like there's a memory of the identity of what America is, and then that it like Make America Great Again is true in the sense that it's affected all of our lives now. It's actually had a material consequence in the world, even if there are many people who think it's a false narrative, or if many people who think it's a false memory, it still has a material consequence. So it's sort of the effect of fantasy, I would say. Like it's again this extra layer that we collectively construct, which organizes our motion, organizes the way we think society should be.
Yeah, but then I would call it belief and not memory, because memory is something I experienced, so I felt. And belief, yeah, of course you can ask what's the question between belief and knowledge, and I would say knowledge is something that you can prove more or less. Of course, proof is something else again. You can ask the question if it's really true, but nevertheless, I would divide between the two things.
Yeah, what about the collective memory? That is an experience that more people, similar experience more people have.
Like the terrorist attack in 2001, for me it's more memory than belief. It's something we are...
It's both. I mean, we all were at a certain moment in the situation and we experienced some feelings. Nowadays we imagine to have felt it in another way, more or less accurate. And then there's also a lot of more stuff. But all this other stuff which is not related to us, this is a belief. So if you think about the first 11th, then it's a combination of knowledge, of belief, and of our own memories.
For me it's interesting, like we have those different categories, like thinking and feeling, or sensing, or memory, or belief, or whatever, and they are somehow, like category, and we kind of insist they are there. And the question, like from what you are saying, how it manifests physically, it's more or less the same. Like the concept of the self versus the concept of like something else, right? It's, like if you think about the brain, it's just a pattern. Like it's just a neural activation, mass, right? But and then if we categorize those cognitive phenomena or like modes of cognizing into those different modes, it's also, the categories are also kind of brain creations, right? Like this is like I'm like experiencing something, like doing something in my brain, and then in the other part of my brain I'm having having a concept of a feeling, and I'm linking the two together and saying like it's feeling, it's not thinking, right? For example, and it's I don't know what I want to say, but this is just we're creating it all.
If I can continue,
Thank
it's
you.
like you take the belief and the memory category, okay? And we say, memory, it's memory because we can confront it against something which is objective, which is facts, which is history, which is time scale.
But then it's belief and knowledge. Memory is something you felt personally, you perceived.
Yeah, but still, memory is supposed to go with something that happened.
Not necessarily.
You can feel pain and have memory of a pain which is not an objective for anyone else than yourself.
Or if I'm afraid, for example. Of course, I can find some reasons why I'm afraid and so on.
But so why are memory and beliefs different?
Because memory is something I have perceived.
And belief you don't have?
No. For example, if you tell me that God existed 2,000 years ago and I believe it, then I haven't experienced God, but I still believe it.
I believe that if you don't experience it,
I would say trying to help like kind of a memory in this way would be a belief applied to past self.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why what I wanted to say. For many, many years, I believed that I broke my wrist, but it was my sister. And until the moment we talked about it and my parents showed me the pictures, it was a memory. And from this moment on, they cleared my mind, helped me to remember that I wasn't, it was actually her. It changed for me.
So you have some kind of image of an event, and then you link it with the concept of the self and of your past self, and then this whole pattern is a memory, right? And if you kind of realize it wasn't the self, it would remain a belief.
But I still can't remember the word.
But then, the question, and then the collective and identity questions, when your self is linked to the self of the nation, let's say, again, in your brain, you are a member of America, then the belief about the past of America is your kind of memory of that collective self, to which your brain puts you in, But
if you say, we are great, so you say, I am great too, because I am an American, US American guy, then yes, then it's a personal belief.
It feels like it's your memory, and you are a bigger entity, you are now a nation, right? And you feel but it's all, playing together of patterns and linking and interlinking and it's kind of, in one bowl, right?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is how do we use it? You may call it memory, you may call it belief, but how do I use it and what influence does it have on the life or on the choices that I make? And this is the most important. What do I need it for?
What do you do with it?
I think we have a very big gap. I think, I'm not sure, but we have a very big gap between this landscape. Okay, let's call it the memory, the belief, the stories, the narratives, and our being, acting, moving out of it. There is no full direct understanding apart from the maze of the rat and the one neuron, but there is a level of emergence there that it's not cannot really be linearized. And this is why I'm saying also that I'm, from this perspective, maybe the categories are very different. It's not a matter if it is a memory or a knowledge or a belief, if it is something which is significant in the sense that it changes my action or it changes my perception of myself and all the rest, or it doesn't. For example, I'm just saying that the categorization that we have today are still based on a very strong preference for objective touching, for objective measurement. So, and this is why we separate very clearly. But if we go to the functionality of it, or to the impact of it, or to the potentiality of it, then maybe the categories are very different. And they are assigned internally in a fashion that does not reflect the...
Is it the same physical mechanism when you, regarding the false memory, how it is built in your brain, and when you have a missing member, you've lost your arm, but you still feel it.
The phantom pain, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Can it be something similar in the brain, or?
It's similar. It's not exactly similar because phantom pain means that there is an activation in the part of the brain which is connected to the arm. Because even if I cut my arm, my motor cortex, which involves in the muscles of my arm, is still there because the damage was here, not here. So in phantom pain, you still have an activation of parts of the brain that are connected to the missing arm. By the way, it's not just arm. It's just most common. It's arm, legs. There are phantom pain of menstrual, even women at the age of 40 who the uterus was taken out. Still, every month they have the phantom pain of the menstrual. So it's not just the arm. But it means that our brain is still working. The parts that were connected to the damaged organ are still working.
Okay, so it's not the same.
It's not exactly the same.
Which suddenly raised a thought in my mind. I'm not personally experienced in it, but Stefan, I know that part of the practices of Buddhism, I think I might be wrong, the part of the practices of Buddhism are this kind of contemplation in which you imagine your body dead, decomposing. It's
Yeah. No.
Don't attach to the appearances.
no, it's very methodical.
You mean the visualization?
Yes, but no visualization. That they don't. It doesn't sell in the New Age version of Buddhism, but it does sell at home. You have all the Tibetan tradition, and they go and they sit for years, and this is part of what they visualize. And I read about it. I do not have personal experience.
No, I can
but
talk about it later.
But I think it's really interesting from this standpoint of, you create a certain kind of memory that influence very strongly your proprioception, your direct reaction to physical stimulus. And I think it's a really interesting way to look at the procedure, at the tradition.
Yeah. And also, if you have a strong relation with another person, there is the same, but I think it's, again, behind it there is a true activation. I can feel its pain, I can feel her pain, I can feel his pain. When he is going to some procedure and the strong relation, because I haven't spoken about it because there is another interesting part of the brain which we call mirror neurons. That we all the time, it's neuron that their function is to reflect the other. So built in our brain there is a mechanism of reflecting the other all the time. And so the other influences me, and I can sense him or her, or I can simulate him or her. And we go back to, as I said in the beginning, that relation is very, very important into thinking, because even if you go to be a monk, you are not alone. Because when you go to be a monk, you go with all your history, your father, your mother, your monk mates that you met. So you are never alone. Really, you cannot be alone in this universe.
That was a good thought.
That's
Thank you.
precious takeaway.
Yeah, first precious takeaway.